Hey, what's up, guys? It's MetaGamesGX here, and we are going to go through the best budget decks that are competitive, that you can still win tournaments with this Yu-Gi-Oh format post-ban list in September of 2024. So we are going to go through some of the best deck lists I've seen from regionals, YCSs, and even nationals from the last format, including this new format post-ban list. There's a lot of great choices that you can now use, especially with the banning of Appaloosa and all the other top contenders like Tenpai Yubel and Snake Eye Fiendsmith being hit pretty hard. So this means that other decks can come out of the woodwork finally, and budget decks now get a little better. So we saw recently at a San Antonio regional that Pendulums came back for the first time in forever swinging with this deck list, which totals up to $132, which means that this is quite a budget option. I'm going to consider most of these budget decks just 150 and below, because I think that basically puts Yu-Gi-Oh at a pretty budget. It's cheaper than One Piece still. It's cheaper than Dragon Ball. So, I mean, it still is cheaper than like Flesh and Blood. In a lot of these games, it would be a lot cheaper. These kinds of decks, anything below 150 or below. You have cards like the Supreme Gate Magician, the Gate Zero, of course, and the Supreme King Dark Worm with old cards like Performer Pal, Skullcrow Joker, which mean that you can just find these cards laying around. But this build also runs lots of common hand traps in it, such as Nibiru Ash Blossom, and cards like Astrograph. A lot of cards that have already been reprinted, such as the Wisdom Eye Magician package and the other Magician cards. I mean, Supreme King Gate Magician is only like $2. Like most of these cards are basically below $1, and this deck is able to make a huge package of really good monsters. Obviously, the most expensive card in the deck being SP Little Knight, so you could actually cut this very easily, and this deck ends up being about $50. So this deck is basically $50 to $130, just depending if you use SP Little Knight or not. And obviously with the new tins now, I think SP Little Knight's now like a $40 card out of the tins. So you can obviously do that. And this deck ends up being quite budget. You get Dragon Shrines. They're quite reprinted. Cross-out Designator just got reprinted, and this deck makes great end boards. Like, you make things like Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon, which is a Omni Negate on your opponent's side of the turn, and then you're also able to use rank 4 toolboxes since all your monsters are level 4s, so you can use the best cards such as Baguska, Tornado Dragon, Abyss Dweller, and then also you're able to use Rebellion Dragon and Absolute Dragon in order to bridge into your other monsters. And then you have the Supreme King Clearwing Dragon with a great link package such as access code. So it's just a very solid option if you learn the combos. We have deck profiles on my channel for magicians. We also have a combo guide if you guys want to see some of the lines. I'll link down below. Next, we have everybody's favorite toxic deck, Runic Stun, of course. This list is a little janky. There shouldn't be a Droll and Lockbird in here, but, there's lots of Runic Stun variants out there that basically all amount to about a $50 deck. You can run anything from Inspector Border to a Mono Iwados. Basically, you just have to run the huge Runic package, which is obviously 2 Fountain plus the Tip, plus the Slumber, plus the Curses, which all these cards have been reprinted in the ground, so they're quite cheap at this point. Pod Duality, which is one of the oldest cards, and this deck is able to put up a monstrous board that makes people really just dread going against it in Swiss rounds of a tournament, because it's able to steal free games really by just being able to run cards like Skill Drain, Synchro Zone, Rivalry of the Warlords, Messenger of Peace, and then also you can do things like Majesty's Fiend, which you saw on stream recently, Dogmatic Punishment, obviously, and then also new options like the Stone, the one Stone card I'll have to up there. It's a very good card. And then also Tyrant's Tirade, which are gonna, even with Skill Drain going to 1, I think that means that this build's still gonna be incredible, honestly. All the cards are quite budget, so like I said, about $50 to $60, $70 deck. You get your side deck as anything you wanted to, but you really want to be running cards like Lava Golem, probably. I think Grave of the Super Ancient Organism is great for the branded matchup if you want to be able to just floodgate me out. Solemn's basically pretty good. Solemn Judgment's pretty good too. You're basically just trying to deck out your opponent with this kind of deck and establish a board that floods out your opponent. I don't think this is the best build in the world, but I think there are plenty of other great builds for this that work out. So definitely check it out if you want a great cheap option that has competed. You see people like Asian Persuasion go into tournaments top consistently at YCSs and nationals with this. So here's a top 8 list from the recent Rio de Janeiro regional, which is Melodious, which is a deck that came out a few months ago, and it basically won the Swedish Nats, and then it kind of didn't really do anything from there. So it's pretty cool to see it back in the fray since the new ban list. And of course, all the cards are quite cheap. This deck ends up equaling about to probably our most expensive card deck on the list, to $150. You don't run SP Little Knight, however, you do run things. He does run things like Dominus Purge, which is a $10 card. This could probably be substituted with just another hand trap, of course. If you take out the Dominus Purges, it's about $70. So this build also has 3 this build also has 3 Pot of Prosperity. So obviously this card is not that you don't need this kind of this many. You could replace this with other cards, just other generic really good cards. You do run the hand trap package, which has been just reprinted on the ground. Melodious is so good because it got the new pendulum support in the form of Couplet and the Refrain, and these cards just absolutely blow the deck's engine out of the water. With Ostinato being like their own branded fusion, you get to make these very powerful interactive fusion monsters, which you get to banish, make 2 monsters that banish 3 from the graveyard quick effect, which is very good against decks like Branded and Snake Eye, of course. And then of course you do have other extension tools, and then you do have a monster which is basically a field bounce, which is very good, and you can make a plethora of other links too. So it's a very good deck. It has a lot of options. You can see why it won the nationals and why it's coming back into the fray with, you know, this possibly with post ban list. Side deck's pretty simple. I mean, really a lot of the time this deck, it looks like, is going into board breakers, going second, because board breakers will help out the engine, but you do have things like Herald of the Orange Light, which is pretty cool. You do also have Raid Raptor. So Raid Raptor is a deck that recently got support, which allows it to now make a board of 1 to 3 towers that are very hard to out. Like, they're anywhere from 4,000 attack to 5,300 to 5,400 attack. So gigantic beat sticks that a lot of decks don't have the options to out. It's very hard for like a deck like Branded to out, in my opinion. So I think you do have a Raid Raptor in order to, if you want a nice budget deck, this is about like $50 to $70, just depending on what you're ending up running. You don't really need any expensive staples. You have the cross-out designators, the imperms, the ghost ogres, the ashes, of course, and then you have just the regular Raid Raptor cards. I mean, Strangulanius is definitely just a little bit more expensive on the, or actually is a little bit, no, Strangulanius is only $2, so yeah, it's not even that expensive. So very much just like a $50 deck. You get to run, and also this is the FTK version, so you can run some Gimmick Puppet FTK stuff, which is kind of funny, to be honest. It's just whatever you want to do. This build runs the Gimmick Puppet Fantastic Machinax with the Kelly Yugioh, which is pretty cool, in the 7 sins, so it's kind of cool to... Here you have Danger Dark World, which obviously had a structure deck last year, and it's still one of the best budget decks in the game, in my opinion. A Dark World player who knows their combo lines, that can go through the combo line of just looping Silva 10 times to just hand rip you for your whole life, is just it can be a really powerful player. This was a top 4 at Pagoda Regional recently, actually, last month. And this guy ran 3 Astral Karibo, which is probably the most expensive card in the deck. The rest of the cards are all pennies on the dollar, basically. Astral Karibo, obviously, being able to reveal an Exceed in your extra deck and special summon from your hand, and becomes the level. And then you're basically making it so a monster cannot be destroyed by battle if it's used as an Exceed, which is kind of interesting. I'm not sure why this was being used, to be honest, but that's kind of non-standard, so you probably don't need to run this if you don't want. I mean, it is the goo, though, so take it for what you will. And then you do have the Danger package, which has been reprinted. I think this deck just does a really good job of just hand ripping your opponent for 5 cards. So if you're willing to sit down and learn the combos, it's definitely still one of the best still budget decks. I think a lot of people just don't like taking their chances on it. It's definitely not the most reliable deck, because if you don't get the hand rip, which isn't guaranteed every time, you kind of have to be forced to make a worse like Manadium kind of board, because you do run a bunch of negates. You run the double Grapha, which is an Omni negate. You do run you run a bunch of level 8s in the form of your Danger Engine, and then Graphas and, you know, Kaijus and all that fun stuff. So you're able to run like Photon Lord, and then of course the Giant Trainer, and then you also do have 4s, so you run the Dugaris. Apo is now banned, so you'd probably just run Silhouette Rabbit, maybe with like the Trap possibly. And then you do just like run just good link cards, and obviously the side deck is just this one's just all over the place, but just good cards, all very cheap staples. That's a lot of the time what a lot of these decks come down to. So I think Dark World is still going to be good until they ban Silva, essentially. The deck's like so consistent at what it does, so definitely come prepared for this deck. It does just hard lose to Droll. That's like one of its biggest drawbacks, which is the issue. Of course, next we have everybody's favorite shifter deck, Flander. Flander is basically just like a $50 deck at this point, or a $100 deck at this point. This build only has 3 POV prosperity, obviously. You could just like put that down to 1, obviously, and just substitute that with 2 staples, like 2 more triple tactics thrusts or talents. I think is just perfectly sufficient for this kind of build. And it's a very cheap build, obviously. I think you have Shifter, you have Ryza. I mean, most of the flu cards have been reprinted in the ground, essentially. I think Robina is still a couple dollars, essentially. But that's really it, and Pop Prosperity now being at 1 means that this deck's price goes down to even like $20. You can run the Thrust, though. Thrust is a super expensive card at the moment. It's about like $40 card, and it's being $20 to $40 cards, so definitely became a little bit more budget because of the Megatons. And Flu is able to set up a board with like Flander's M-Pen, which makes it so your opponent's attack position monsters cannot activate their effects, which is very good. It makes it so your opponent has to play super awkwardly and to play around it. And you're obviously, it's a normal summon deck too, so you're just like chaining normal summons and chain all your effects, basically chain block your monsters. So it's really hard to interact with the Flu cards. It's super hard to, unless you have like a targeting effect. So cards like Imperm is super good, like Imperm on Robina is super broken, but you know, just they also loop into things like Mist Valley Apex Avion, which is an Omni negate, and then also the Ryza, which just bounces cards and hand loops basically. So it's a very good card. Very good deck, very versatile deck. You also have broken cards like Harpy's Featherstorm, which is a card that basically says your opponent cannot activate any monster effects for the rest of the turn, and it's searchable off of Triple Tactics Thrust. So I think it's a very broken deck that's still very good in the meta, and you will be caught with your pants down if you do not come prepared for it. The extra deck's very like whatever for this deck. They're probably gonna be running more POV Extravagance now, but the extra deck, they never go into it, so it doesn't really matter. I think Sprite is one of the best budget stacks still. You have obviously traditional Sprite, which has been reprinted into the ground, which has topped plenty of tournaments, and you have obviously the new techs with the Swap Frog package with the Ice Barrier cards. You do have this build right here, which is super budget. It's like a $50 build basically, where you just run Sprite Blues, Swap Frogs with Ibly Lock, and Silent Anglers to basically facilitate Omega Link 2 and Rank 2 plays. So it's very much still an option to do. You could also add in the Ice Barrier cards and make it even better. Like right here is an Ice Barrier Sprite deck, which runs more Nimble Beavers, plus a small Ice Barrier package in the Mirror Mage. Plus you're able to run the spell, which facilitates even more rank 2 plays. So definitely would recommend like a build like this. It's still very cheap at like about $100 to $20. Appaloosa is now banned, but you can obviously put in the Silhouette Rabbit. This deck just spams out link 2s and rank 2s, which makes a bunch of negates essentially, because Sprite Carrot is obviously a spell and trap card negate, and then Sprite Red is obviously a monster effect negate. So you always set up a board full of those, plus just whatever rank 2s you make, which it's really hard because like they have a built-in nib out too, so, and they can run hand traps and board breakers. So it's a very good deck, very solid still. Don't write off Sprite, even though Sprite Alpha is banned in the TCG. And next you have TEARLAMENTS. This was actually for my very own channel, guys. What's up? Say hi to me.
What's up, guys?
We were at Nats when we got Derek's deck profile here, and he has a TEARLAMENT deck profile that is basically very budget. It's about $100 to $150 depending on where you see the prices. It's just gotten cheaper though with things like Beatrice getting banned. So I would say that this build, it does run Fenrir, which is the most expensive part about it. That's definitely the most expensive part about it. But the rest of the cards are basically dollars, if anything. You have Pearl Rhino, which has been reprinted into the ground, Scream, Soliac, and all the tier names, including Tier Cash, which just got reprinted. So definitely just made the price of this deck go down. I think this is the incorrect price. If you guys see that, it's no longer $9. Danger Nessie, obviously, we just went over, very cheap. So all these cards have been reprinted, but this deck makes one of the best boards still, guys. Even with Kikolos ban, you're still able to go through all the best fusions in the game between Grapha, Guardian Chimera, TEARLAMENTS Kalos, TEARLAMENTS Kaleido Heart, which allows you to bounce a card on your opponent's turn, basically on basically every turn, and then it's an extender, and we know as Mirror Jade is one of the best boss monster because it's an extender too. So Kaleido Heart has the extension with it too. Kalos is very good too. It's just an omni summon negate, very good. And then you do have extension tools like Dangerous and Winda and Mud Dragon and Garura. And then obviously the Link package. You don't have to run Beatrice at this point, but obviously you can run other things. I think you could run a Pilgrim Reaper now. Pilgrim Reaper lets both you and your opponent mill 6, so it basically makes up for the Beatrice. You basically get to mill 6, which is just as good in tier, frankly, as the Beatrice. You run the Draco sack because you run a few 7s, so it's pretty funny. And also you can go into the Cherry Beanie line in order to basically make link plays, which is very cool to see. This deck's very good. It's very budget too. You don't have to run the Fiendsmith card, so that's why I'm putting this under there. It's one of the best decks in top 60 forward Nats this year, so definitely tried and true. Last but not least, there's Gimmick Puppets. It's basically a very budget deck now because of the fact that it just got hit on the ban list. The horse cards did get reprinted too, so I do want to mention them. It's definitely on the more expensive side. Like this build, you shouldn't probably run the thrust. Probably could take out the horse stuff. The horse definitely helps though, and now you're gonna have to run cards like Meltronus, but definitely just look out for Gimmick Puppets if you want something fun that's somewhat cheap. All right, guys, if you guys like this list, please let me know down below. What was your favorite budget deck that we went over? Of course, let me know down below in the comments. If we get 100 likes on this video, we'll do another one of these, but except we're going to talk about the most underrated decks for the format. So we'll be seeing you guys later. MetaGamesGX signing out.